الحمد لله أحمده واستعينه وأؤمن به وأتوكل عليه واستنصره واستجيره واستهديه واستشيره واستشهد به، فإنه من هدى الله فلا ضال له ومن ضل الله فلا هادي له. والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله ونبيه وأصحابه وعلى كل من اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. قال الله في كتابه العزيز: إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له والحمد لله وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. We are approaching the Eid, inshallah, and it is always a time to remember the fundamentals of our faith and what this message has always been about. When Allah tells us in the Qur'an that your life, your salah, your worship is directed towards Allah, and with all that follows from that. But the most the command that follows to say that you are the first Awwal al-Muslimin, that you are the first of Muslims. This is as if a command to the conscious, to you, your very heart, is that you approach your faith not as if you are the product, the repository, the receptacle of all that has been deposited in it, there to simply be preserved and allowed to simmer or sometimes deteriorate, but to approach your faith and to approach Islam as if you are the first of all Muslims, to renew that belief in you, to rethink what Islam means and what being a Muslim means in you, as if you are the first Muslim, the first person to be guided. This is not a point about the ego. This is not a point addressed to the ego to inflate it and raise it. As Imam al-Shahrastani says, فَإِنَّهَا لَيْسَتْ مَقَالَةْ كِبَرٍ. It is not a statement for arrogance, but إِنَّهَا مَقَالَةْ مَلَامَةٍ, that it is a statement that in fact acts to chide you and to reform you and renew you and reinvigorate you, or it is a command to reinvigorate you, to bring in you the very fundamentals, the very premises of what it means to be a Muslim. And what it means to be a Muslim in all its connotations. And what were those connotations? A group of people with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ hear the message of Allah, the message of God in the first revelation of Iqra and the subsequent revelations, to become transformed into a human ball of moral energy. If they were physical energy without morality, without akhlaq, without ethics, they would have been like all other conquerors that have come and gone in history. People who only use violence, live by the sword and die by the sword. They exist as long as the sword is in their hand, and then eventually they tire out and die of simply sheer exertion of energy. That's the nature of violence. But the early Muslims, the Prophet ﷺ and his companions and his Ahlul Bayt and his family, if this was what their Islam was about, Islam would have been as passing a phenomena as the Mongol invasion or the Crusades or any other of the violent phenomena that came and gone in human history. But that is not what transforms a people. That is not what builds an ummah. What builds an ummah and what transforms a people is their morality, their ethics, their civilization, what they can change in the human heart and the human conscience, what they can transform in the way that people relate to each other. We know that there are certain invariable and unchangeable elements for human beings to exist. For human beings to exist, they need a society. And to have a society, you need bonds and you need means of communication. If a society doesn't have bonds, there's nothing that bonds a society together, what happens? It all goes to war against each other. It breaks apart. It becomes individuals, each seeking their own interest and having no care for the other. And if there's no communication, bonds don't develop. If everyone talks and no one is listening to the other, or if no one is interested in conveying what they know and what they've learned, again, the social structure falls. But these bonds, these magical elements for society to be built and for society to replicate into many other societies, is an art that only the most morally conscious truly develop. The art of caring and the art of talking and listening. And that is what the Muslim Ummah was about. And that's why it created the civilization that, despite all the wars, including civil conflicts and disputes and battles over power and who gets to be the Khalifa or not, in the Umayyad and Abbasid periods and so on, it was able to anchor and establish civilization. The Prophet ﷺ says, لا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا. Really, you are not true believers unless you learn to love one another. And what is a symptom of tahabbub, of loving one another? Ifsha'u salam, spreading peaceful tidings. Now, Ifsha'u salam, it's quite fascinating because in contemporary Islam, often you find people think Ifsha'u salam means to go around saying Assalamu alaikum. But that's not Ifsha'u salam. Grammatically, that's Ifsha' sighat salam, but not salam itself. To go around spreading amongst each other a dynamic of peace means the necessary element of it is to feel the bonds of brotherhood, to feel the bonds of ummah wahida, to feel the bonds of ukhuwah, to feel the bonds of tahabbub, to care for one another. And then you are able to truly fulfill this command of Ifsha'u salam, to spread peace and establish peace between one another. In other words, to be able to exist without allowing anything other than your belief in God and your iman and your nusuk and your salah, all those things that are directed solely for the sake of God, to intervene in the bonds of your community. In other words, if your salah and your nusuk, your prayers and your belief is truly directed to God, and it serves nothing of the ego itself, it elevates not your perception of yourself in community or your status or your prestige, but it's something that is sincere and directed towards God and God alone, then there is no reason for it to clash with the social positioning of others. And truly then you can become more capable of getting through to this magical potion that creates not just individuals of believers, but community of believers, and ultimately a civilization of believers. As Allah tells us, it's always useful to hearken back in our minds and our hearts أول المسلمين, but not simply as a storybook, and not simply as majalis dhikr, where we sit and we simply transform it into a method of remembrance, or we read narratives of the past, stories of the past as a form of ta'abbud, as a form of worship, and then go on with our ways as it is. As Sheikh Hamid Ghazali says in his Ihya, that whose iman does not transform his akhlaq, that whose iman hasn't transformed his character and ethics, has no real iman. There is no real faith in there. If your ethics, if the fundamental nature of your ethics do not transform, then you cannot be awwal muslimin, or even, and we're not talking about takfir here, we're not talking about, that's something that only God is, we're not talking about someone going around telling others you are not, we're talking about you holding yourself responsible, you holding yourself accountable, you looking into your face and تحاسب نفسك قبل أن تحاسب, that you hold yourself accountable before you are held accountable. We're not talking about pointing the fingers at others and saying, why don't you do this, why don't you do that. We are talking about dhikra, فالذكرى تنفع المسلمين, وصلى الله يستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على محمد خاتم النبيين إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت أنا أول المسلمين. As we approach the Eid, inshallah, among those things that we must recall, that the certitude of Iman is that you reinvigorate in yourself, rekindle in yourself what you know innately to be true. That a Muslim, as the Prophet said, a Muslim man salim al-nas min lisanihi wa yadihi, that a Muslim, a true Muslim, is a person who does not hurt people either through their tongue or their hands. In other words, the idea of a Muslim inflicting suffering on others as a way of life is not Islam at all. It is a fundamental breach with the message of Islam. There's a huge difference between historical and between things that are done as a matter of necessity, but the way of life of Islam هو إفشاء السلام وإقامة الصلاة and تتبسم في وجه أخيك, or as you say, that you smile in the face, or that you carry good tidings and good cheers in the face of your brothers and sisters, of course. And that in the Eid, especially Eid al-Adha, nothing of all the various occasions in Islam exemplifies what this faith is truly about as much as Eid al-Adha does in a practical, functional way. Eid al-Adha is not about eating and stuffing ourselves. It is about renewing the bonds of this community, the community that is supposed to be based on tahabbub and loving one another. Eid al-Adha is about, as Allah tells us, that God gains nothing from the meat and the blood of animals that are slaughtered, or the meat, that the proteins that you consume, but it is an occasion in which you do what you do, you bear the expenses, first and foremost to feed, to help, to assist the other. In other words, to be a living embodiment of that very simple principle of loving the other and caring for the other. If you don't care about the other, you don't love the other. It's impossible to love without the care. And Eid al-Adha is fundamentally about renewing the bonds of community. It's not about celebrating in the sense of a selfish method of celebrating, let's just be happy. It's not about, although happiness of course is desirable, and I have nothing against happiness, but the point is that you extend your hands to your community and renewing this simple message is the fulfillment of أنا أول المسلمين, I'm the first of Muslims. اللهم اهدنا, اللهم اغفر لنا واعف عنا وارحمنا وكن لنا ولا تكن علينا. اللهم واصلح حالنا واصلح حال أمة الإسلام وأمة المسلمين. اللهم قربنا من بعض واجعل الحب بيننا واغفر لنا ذنوبنا واعف عنا وارحمنا إنك أنت الرحمن الرحيم. أقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين